Hi guys, my name is Molson Hart and I'm going to teach you how to build a startup in a post-network state world. So the central question here is whether or not we're going to be living in a US hegemonic world or a China hegemonic world, especially given that we're talking about manufacturing and building hardware startups, okay? China is the elephant in the room when it comes to that. So this is what qualifies me to talk about this topic. My team, my company, we've sold about $500 million of those little interlocking plastic discs. I built that warehouse in Austin, Texas. We're one of the largest plush animal manufacturers, sellers on Amazon. And with my brother Hilton, I started a legal tech startup, which we sold this year, which collected about over $70 million from Chinese infringers. And I speak Chinese, and so these things together kind of explain why I'm qualified to talk about this topic. Okay, so the generally accepted idea today, perhaps not in Singapore, but definitely in the United States, is that the United States is the world's dominant power. Why is that? Well, we have a great brand in terms of attracting immigrants, from Elon Musk to Hulk Hogan's not an immigrant per se, but he kind of represents that great American brand. We're back-to-back World War champs. We've got Tesla, which is great. And then we've got these wonderful aircraft carriers which project American military might and which cause us to be the dominant power in the world. But there are kind of some cracks in that armor. And as a patriotic American who's paid lots of taxes, it's kind of difficult to see, but recently one of our bridges collapsed. It's unclear how long it'll take to put it back together. We had a very embarrassing exit from Afghanistan in 2021. Boeing made the Starliner. Boeing formerly was a really impressive American industrial giant that's fallen on tough times. And we generally think of the US dollar as its power being sourced from American military might and the protection of sea lanes. And over here, we've got the Houthis who stopped the flow of merchandise through the Red Sea. If you ask an American whether or not China is going to overtake the United States as the world's dominant power, oftentimes what they say is, well, we said the same thing was going to happen about Japan in the 80s and 90s, and that didn't happen. Therefore, it can't happen with China. One, this is a logical fallacy, but two, China and Japan are totally different countries. China is, just on the basis of population, over 10 times Japan's population. And then if you just look at like a map of American military bases, there are American military bases all over Japan. There are no American military bases in China. In terms of a great power struggle, there are a couple of other strong points for China in terms of being a competitor to the United States. The country is extremely patriotic. There is a Chinese cultural capacity to 吃苦, which means to eat bitter. I'm sure people in Singapore know what that means. So they can tolerate hardship. The Chinese government is structured to kind of better propagandize its people, which is important in great power competitions, and it's ethnically homogenous, unlike the United States. So in order to be a powerful, economically dominant industrial power, you also need to bring some innovation to the table. We all know about DJI. We've seen the Huawei folding phone. And within the last 1 to 2 years, you may not have seen it so much in Singapore, where you have a 150% tariff on car imports, so I hear. But China has taken over the world's electric vehicle market, which is quite impressive. And then over here on this graph, you can see Chinese patent applications exceeded the United States' in 2022 for the first time. And these are not garbage Chinese patents. These are patents that are going to the world stage. And then again, to be this dominant industrial economic power, whether it's Bitcoin or AI, you need a lot of power generation. Power generation in the United States, as my understanding, has mostly remained flat, whereas in China it's growing, whether it's nuclear or solar. And then on that graph is actually a little bit deceptive, and this is one of the most important points I can make in this presentation. the number of Chinese STEM graduates is comparable to the rest of the world combined. So if you add up India, the United States, and Russia, it's around the same number of STEM graduates that are graduating in China. Okay, so all these STEM graduates are joining the economy, and that makes China a really powerful economic force. And if you have seen the drone display over in Shenzhen, China has this amazing supply chain that can't be beaten. It's the most powerful in the world. Okay, so there's this open question. Is it a US-dominated world or a Chinese-dominated world? There are pros and cons to both sides, but we'll just kind of assume that in this post-network state world, China is the dominant force. So how do you build a hardware startup in that world? First thing you need to do, fly, not necessarily to Shenzhen, it depends on what you want to build, but you need to fly to China. Okay? A lot of people, particularly in the United States, are actually a little bit scared to do that, but you just need to go. So even if you're building your hardware startup on the coast of Africa or an island in the Caribbean, you need to go to China if you're going to build a hardware startup. The startup doesn't necessarily need to be based there, but you have to go. You're going to see a thread, okay? If you want to build a hardware startup, you have to do something that China cannot do. Because if you compete directly with China, you are probably going to lose because they're going to beat you on efficiency and cost. China has banned, I believe, Bitcoin mining and transactions, so that's an area of opportunity. And there are others like it. There's potentially, so I'm in Singapore, which is 80% Chinese, but a lot of people argue that there's a cultural difficulty when it comes to 0 to 1 innovation. Okay, so Elon Musk and Starlink, that is a 0 to 1 innovation. Colin Huang of Pinduoduo and Wang Chuanfu of BYD, those are more 1 to N innovations. So if you're in the network state, perhaps you should be focusing on something that is completely innovative rather than scaling up electric vehicles or making one of the most efficient e-commerce companies. Indonesia banned the export of raw nickel, and so if you're in Indonesia, there's an opportunity there to be making like battery startups because they're no longer just exporting the raw materials. If you're in a country like America and you want to build a hardware startup, you might want to look at agriculture because there's a competitive advantage there that the Chinese do not have. Don't do the military stuff. That's not good. We don't need more of that, but that is a viable option. That's Anduril. And then if whatever you're making is just too large to be moved in containers, that's another potential option when it comes to competing in this possibly post-China hegemonic world. China currently is still struggling when it comes to understanding intellectual property on the global scene, and so there are some opportunities there. Okay, like you need a patent, for example, if you want to protect your business from Chinese competition. And we all have to remember that there's, despite huge numbers of Chinese graduates in the STEM fields graduating, there are countless other countries that are graduating or have experienced people in the industrial fields that you can leverage for your startup. And I'm sorry if your country's not on there. It's not the fairest map. Okay, yeah, that's it. That's one of the products we make, and you can follow me on X and TikTok. And just to conclude, the whole essence of being successful in hardware startups is avoiding competition from China. Because if you compete directly with them, they're probably going to beat you on efficiency and price and a whole host of other things because their supply chains are the best in the world. When you're on that Caribbean island, the factory is not going to be down the street. The components are not going to be made down the street. They're probably going to be predominantly made in China. So you have to be really judicious about how you create your hardware startup. And I guess the final thing, whether it's Apple or NVIDIA, you shouldn't sleep on hardware startups. There's a huge amount of economic value that can be created there. And so it's something that you should consider if you want to start your entrepreneurial journey. Okay, thanks very much.